First, some poems about the suburbs of London, north of the Thames, where I was born. This one is called Middlesex. Gaily into Ruislip Gardens runs the red electric train, with 1,000 tars and pardons, daintily alights Elaine, hurries down the concrete station with a frown of concentration, out into the outskirts edges, where a few surviving hedges keep alive our lost Elysium, rural Middlesex again. Well-cut Windsmore flapping lightly, Jacquemart scarf of mauve and green, hiding hair which Friday nightly delicately drowns in dreen. Fair Elaine, the bobby soxer, fresh complexioned with inoxa, gains the garden, father's hobby, hangs her Windsmore in the lobby, settles down to sandwich supper and the television screen. Gentle Brent, I used to know you, wandering Wembleywoods at will. Now what change your waters show you in the meadowlands you fill. Recollect the elm trees misty, and the footpaths climbing twisty under cedar-shaded palings, low laburnum leaned on railings, out of Northolt, on and upward to the heights of Harrow-Hill. Parish of enormous hayfields, Perivale stood all alone, and from Greenford, scent of Mayfields most enticingly was blown, over market gardens tidy, taverns for the bona fide, Cockney anglers, Cockney shooters, Murray poshes, looping pooters, long in Kensal Green and Highgate, silent under soot and stone. Do you remember how, when one went for a holiday at the sea, and then came home inland, how one longed as a child to keep the sea in one's mind and kept seaweed at home and things like that, although all the time one was in London? Well, this is a poem about Harrow-on-the-Hill, thought of by a child who's just had a holiday in Cornwall, and it's autumn, and the holidays are over, and school's near. When melancholy autumn comes to Wembley, and electric trains are lighted after tea, the poplars near the stadium are trembly with their tap and whispering to me, like the sound of little breakers spreading out along the surf line when the estuary's filling with the sea. Then Harrow-on-the-Hill's a rocky island, and Harrow churchyard full of sailors' graves, and the constant click and kissing of the trolley buses hissing is the level to the wheelstone turned to waves, and the rumble of the railway is the thunder of the rollers as they gather up for plunging into caves. There's a storm cloud to the westward over Kenton. There's a line of harbour lights at Perivale. Is it rounding rough Pentyre in a flood of sunset fire, the little fleet of trawlers under sail? Can those boats be only rooftops as they stream along the skyline in a race for port and Padstow with the gale? All my married life I've lived in Berkshire, the Wiltshire end of Berkshire, and this is a poem called Upper Lambourne, about a small village on the Downs where there are a lot of training establishments and where you see race horses. And I was on my bicycle and noticed a little Victorian church there and its churchyard. Up the ash tree climbs the ivy, up the ivy climbs the sun. With a 20,000 pattering has a valley breeze begun. Feathery ash, neglected elder, shift the shade and make it run. Shift the shade toward the nettles, and the nettles set it free to streak the stained Carrara headstone, where in 1923 he who trained 100 winners paid the final entrance fee. Leathery limbs of Upper Lambourne, leathery skin from sun and wind, leathery breeches, spreading stables, shining saddles left behind, to the down the string of horses, moving out of sight and mind. Feathery ash in leathery Lambourne waves above the sarsen stone, and Edwardian plantations so coniferously mown as to make the swelling downland far surrounding seem their own. And now I live in Wantage, which is a red brick town, an old town, at the foot of the Berkshire Downs, and where we have 8 bells in the parish church, and the Anglican order Wantage Sisters live in the town in various buildings, and this poem is meant to be like the sound of 8 bells on a fine morning. Now with the bells through the apple bloom sundily sounding, and the prayers of the nuns in their chapel gloom us all surrounding, where the brook flows, brick walls of rose send on the motionless meadow the bell notes rebounding. Wallflowers are bright in their beds, and their scent all pervading. Withered are primroses' heads, and the hyacinth fading. But flowers by the score, multitudes more, weed flowers and seed flowers and mead flowers our paths are invading. Where are the words to express such a reckless bestowing? The voices of birds utter less than the thanks we are owing. Bell notes alone ring praise of their own, as clear as the weed-waving brook, and as evenly flowing. This is about Cornwall, North Cornwall, where I've always spent my summer holidays since I was a child. Trebetherick. We used to picnic where the thrift grew deep and tufted to the edge. We saw the yellow foam flakes drift in trembling sponges on the ledge below us, till the wind would lift them up the cliff and o'er the hedge. Sand in the sandwiches, wasps in the tea, sun on our bathing dresses heavy with the wet, squelch of the bladder wrack waiting for the sea, fleas round the tamarisk, an early cigarette. From where the coastguard houses stood, one used to see below the hill the lichened branches of a wood, in summer silver cool and still, and there the shade of evil could stretch out at us from Schiller Mill, thick with sloe and blackberry, uneven in the light. Lonely ran the hedge, the heavy meadow was remote. The oldest part of Cornwall was the wood, as black as night, and the pheasant and the rabbit lay torn open at the throat. But when a storm was at its height, and feathery slate was black in rain, and tamarisks were hung with light, and golden sand was brown again, springtide and blizzard would unite, and sea came flooding up the lane. Waves full of treasure then were roaring up the beach, ropes round our mackintoshes, waders warm and dry. We waited for the wreckage to come swirling into reach, Rafe, Vasey, Alistair, Biddy, John and I. Then roller into roller curled and thundered down the rocky bay, and we were in a water world of rain and blizzard, sea and spray, and one against the other hurled we struggled round to Grenaway. Blessed be St. Enodoc, blessed be the wave, blessed be the springy turf. We pray, pray to thee, ask for our children all the happy days you gave to Rafe, Vasey, Alistair, Biddy, John and me. The Heart of Thomas Hardy. The heart of Thomas Hardy flew out of Stinsford churchyard, a little thumping fig. It rocketed over the elm trees. Lighter than air it flew, straight to where its creator waited in golden nimbus, just as in 1860 Hardman and Son of Brum had depicted him in the chancel. Slowly out of the grass, slitting the mounds in the centre, riving apart the roots, rose the new-covered corpses, Tess and Jude and his worship, various unmarried mothers, woodmen, cutters of turf, adulterers, church restorers, turning aside the stones, thump on the upturned churchyard, soaring over the elm trees, slower than Thomas Hardy, weighted down with a conscience, now for the first time fleshly, taking form as a growth hung from the feet like a sponge bag. There in the heart of the nimbus twittered the heart of Hardy. There on the edge of the nimbus slowly revolved the corpses, radiating round the twittering heart of Hardy, slowly started to turn in the light of their own creator, died away in the night, as frost will blacken a dahlia. Oscar Wilde was arrested in the Cadogan Hotel in Pont Street in London. It always seemed to me a most unlikely place to be arrested, and when I wrote this poem, Lord Alfred Douglas, whom I knew, was very annoyed about it. He said it wasn't truthful. However, it's just what I thought might have happened. He sipped at a weak hock and seltzer as he gazed at the London skies through the Nottingham lace of the curtains, or was it his bees-winged eyes? To the right and before him, Pont Street did tower in her new-built red, as hard as the morning gaslight that shone on his unmade bed. I want some more hock in my seltzer. And Robbie, please give me your hand. Is this the end or beginning? How can I understand? So you've brought me the latest yellow book, and Buchan has got in it now. Approval of what is approved of is as false as a well-kept vow. More hock, Robbie. Where is the seltzer? Dear boy, pull again at the bell. They are all little better than cretins, though this is the Cadogan Hotel. One Astrakhan coat is at Willis's, another one's at the Savoy. Do fetch my Morocco portmanteau and bring them on later, dear boy. A thump and a murmur of voices. Oh, why must they make such a din? As the door of the bedroom swung open, and two plain-clothes policemen came in. Mr. Wilde, we have come for to take you where felons and criminals dwell. We must ask you to leave with us quietly, for this is the Cadogan Hotel. He rose, and he put down the yellow book. He staggered, and terrible-eyed, he brushed past the palms on the staircase and was helped to a hansom outside. In Oxford, there's a very nice, quiet, old-fashioned college called Pembroke College, which maintains the old traditions of Oxford before 1914, probably more than any other college. This was largely due to its master and its senior tutor and its bursar and an old science don there called Dr. Ramsden. Dr. Ramsden retired, and the end of his life he spent a lot of time growing silkworms on the mulberry trees in the Fellows' Garden at Pembroke College. Well, his death moved me very much because it seemed to be the end of an epoch in Oxford. And this is a poem in his memory. Dr. Ramsden cannot read the Times obituary today. He's dead. Let monographs on silkworms by other people be thrown away unread, for he who best could understand and criticize them, he lies clay in bed. The body waits in Pembroke College, where the ivy taps the panes all night. That old head so full of knowledge, that good heart that kept the brains all right, those old cheeks that faintly flushed as the port suffused the veins, drained white. Crocus in the Fellows' Garden, winter jasmine up the wall, gleam gold. Shadows of Victorian chimneys on the sunny grass plot fall, long, cold. Master, bursar, senior tutor, these his three survivors all feel old. They remember as the coffin to its final obsequations leaves the gates, buzz of bees in window boxes on their summer ministrations, kitchen din, cups and plates, and the getting of bump suppers for the long-dead generations coming in from eights. If there's one part of London that depresses me more than anywhere else, it's the district of Harley Street. And I was once at an osteopath's having something done to my knee, something quite harmless, in Devonshire Street, which is off Harley Street, and opposite I saw an oldish man and his wife come out of the door of a doctor's house, and the old man had under his arm one of those big brown paper envelopes full of X-ray photographs. And I imagined that they had sad news for him in them. And I imagined what they might have said to each other, that man and his wife, as they went away out into London. The heavy mahogany door with its wrought iron screen shuts, and the sound is rich, sympathetic, discreet. The sun still shines on this 18th century scene with Edwardian faience adornments, Devonshire Street. No hope. and the X-ray photographs under his arm confirm the message. His wife stands timidly by. The opposite brick-built house looks lofty and calm, its chimneys steady against a mackerel sky. No hope, and the iron knob of this palisade, so cold to the touch, is luckier now than he. O merciless, hurrying Londoners, why was I made for the long and the painful deathbed coming to me? She puts her fingers in his, as, loving and silly, at long past Kensington dances she used to do. It's cheaper to take the tube to Piccadilly, and then we can catch a 19 or a 22. Middle-aged love. This poem is called In a Bath Teashop. Let us not speak for the love we bear one another. Let us hold hands and look. She, such a very ordinary little woman, he, such a thumping crook, but both, for a moment, little lower than the angels in the tea-shop's ingle nook. This love poem is meant to be spoken by a rakish Irish baronet who's got a sham Gothic house in the middle of Ireland, and he's speaking to a colleen on the lake side of Derravara in County Westmeath. I love your brown curls, black in rain, my colleen. I love your grey eyes by this verdant shore. 2 Derravaras to plunge into and drown me, hold not those lakes of light so near me more. My hand lies yellow and hairy in your pink hand, fragilis rubra of the bramble flower, yet soft and thornless, cool and as caressing as grasses bending heavy with a shower. See how the clouds twist over in the twilight. See how the gale is ruffling up the lake. Lie still forever on this little peninsula, heartbeat and heartbeat, steady till we wake. Hear how the beech trees roar above Glencara. See how the fungus circles in the shade. Roar, trees, and moan, you gliding royal daughters. Circle us with poison. We are not afraid. Gothic on Gothic, my abbey soars around me. I've walks and avenues, emerald from rain, plentiful timber in a lake reflected, and creamy meadow sweet, scenting my domain. Press to your cheeks my hand so hot and wasted, smooth with my fingers the freckles of your frown. Take you my abbey, it is yours for always. I am so full of love that I shall drown. Another Irish love poem, more personal this time, though I see it's called The Irish Unionist's Farewell to Greta Hellstrom in 1922. It happened that the girl looked like a Swede, which is unusual in Ireland. Golden-haired and golden-hearted, I would ever have you be, as you were when last we parted, smiling slow and sad at me. Oh, the fighting down of passion, oh, the centuries' seeming pain, parting in this offhand fashion, in Dungarvan in the rain. Slanting eyes of blue, unweeping, stands my Swedish beauty where gusts of Irish rain are sweeping round the statue in the square. Corner boys against the walling watch us furtively in vain, and the Angelus is calling through Dungarvan in the rain. Gales along the Cummerah mountains, beating sleet on creaking signs, iron gutters turned to fountains, and the windscreen laced with lines, and the evening getting later, and the ache increased again, as the distance grows the greater from Dungarvan in the rain. There is no one now to wonder what eccentric sits in state, while the beech trees rock and thunder round his gate lodge and his gate. Gone the ornamental plaster, gone the overgrown domain, and the car goes fast and faster from Dungarvan in the rain. Had I kissed and drawn you to me, had you yielded warm for cold, what a power had pounded through me as I stroked your streaming gold. You were right to keep us parted. Bound and parted we remain, aching if unbroken-hearted. O Dungarvan in the rain. A Lincolnshire church. Greyly tremendous the thunder hung over the width of the wold, but here the green marsh was alight in a huge cloud cavern of gold, and there on a gentle eminence, topping some ash trees, a tower, silver and brown in the sunlight, worn by sea wind and shower, Lincolnshire middle-pointed, and around it, turning their backs, the usual sprinkle of villas, the usual woman in slacks, cigarette in her mouth, regretting Americans, stands as a wireless croons in the kitchen, manicuring her hands. Dear old bloody old England, of telegraph poles and tin, seemingly so indifferent, and with so little soul to win. What sort of church, I wonder? The path is a grassy mat, and grass is drowning the headstones, sloping this way and that. Cathedral glass in the windows, a roof of unsuitable slate, restored with a vengeance for certain, about 1888. The door swung easily open. Unlocked for these parts is odd. And there, on the south aisle altar, is the tabernacle of God. There, where the white light flickers, by the white and silver veil, a wafer dipped in a wine drop, is the presence the angels hail. Is God who created the heavens, and the wide green marsh as well, who sings in the sky with the skylark, who calls in the evening bell, is God who prepared his coming with fruit of the earth for his food, with stone for building his churches, and trees for making his rood. There where the white light flickers, our Creator is with us yet, to be worshipped by you and the woman of the slacks and the cigarette. The great door shuts and lessens that roar of churchyard trees, and the presence of God incarnate has brought me to my knees. I acknowledge my transgressions, the well-known phrases rolled, with thunder sailing over from the heavily clouded wold, and my sin is ever before me. There in the lighted east he stood in that lowering sunlight, an Indian Christian priest. And why he was here in Lincolnshire I neither asked nor knew, nor whether his flock were many, nor whether his flock was few. I thought of the heaving waters that bore him from sun-glare harsh of some Indian Anglican mission to this green enormous marsh. There where the white light flickers, here as the rains descend, the same mysterious Godhead is welcoming his friend. Pourri from a Surrey garden. Miles of pram in the wind and Pam in the gorse track, coconut smell of the broom and a packet of weights pressed in the sand, the thud of a hoof on a horse track, a horse-riding horse for a horse track, conifer county of Surrey approached through remarkable wrought-iron gates. Over your boundary now, I wash my face in a bird bath. Then which path shall I take? That over there by the pram, down by the pond, or yes, I will take the slippery third path, trodden away with gym shoes, beautiful fir dry alley that leads to the bountiful body of Pam. Pam, I adore you, Pam, you great big mountainous sports skell, whizzing them over the net, full of the strength of 5, that old Malvernian brother, you zephyr and khaki short skell, although he's playing for Woking, can't stand up to your wonderful backhand drive. See the strength of her arm, as firm and hairy as Hendron's. See the size of her thighs, the pout of her lips, as cross and full of a pent-up strength she swipes at the rhododendrons, lucky the rhododendrons, and flings her arrogant lovelock back with a petulant toss. Over the redolent pine woods, in at the bathroom casement, one fine Saturday, Windlesham bells shall call, up the Butterfield aisle, rich with Gothic enlacement, licensed now for embracement, Pam and I, as the organ thunders over you all. You'll remember how during the war everything in England seemed intensified and very precious because one might not see it the next day. This is a description of Henley-on-Thames in the Thames Valley, written during the war. I see the winding water make a short and then a shorter lake, as here stand I and houseboat high survey the upper Thames. By sun the mud is amber dyed, in ripples slow and flat and wide, that flap against the houseboat side and flop away in gems. In mud and elder-scented shade, a reach away the breach is made, by dive and shout that circles out to Henley tower and town. And boats for hire the rafters ring, and pink on white the roses cling, and red the bright geraniums swing in baskets dangling down. When shall I see the Thames again, the prow-promoted gems again, as beefy hats without their hats come shooting through the bridge, and cheerio and cheery bye across the waste of waters die, and lo the mists of evening lie, and lightly skims the midge. The Reverend Martin Wilson, who runs the religious broadcasts in the BBC at the Bristol end of it, asked me to write a weekly diary of a church mouse. Well, I started to write it, and it came out so arch in prose and so embarrassing, I thought the only thing to do was to put it into verse. And the result is this verse here, which is meant to be faintly funny. Here among long discarded cassocks, damp stools, and half-split open hassocks, here where the vicar never looks, I nibble through old service books. Lean and alone I spend my days behind this Church of England bays. I share my dark forgotten room with 2 oil lamps and half a broom. The cleaner never bothers me, so here I eat my frugal tea. My bread is sawdust mixed with straw, my jam is polish for the floor. Christmas and Easter may be feasts for congregations and for priests, and so may Whitsun. All the same, they do not fill my meagre frame. For me, the only feast at all is autumn's harvest festival, when I can satisfy my want with ears of corn around the font. I climb the eagle's brazen head to burrow through a loaf of bread. I scramble up the pulpit stair and gnaw the marrows hanging there. It is enjoyable to taste these items ere they go to waste, but how annoying when one finds that other mice with pagan minds come into church my food to share, who have no proper business there. 2 field mice, who have no desire to be baptized, invade the choir. A large and most unfriendly rat comes in to see what we are at. He says he thinks there is no God, and yet he comes. It's rather odd. This year he stole a sheaf of wheat. It screened our special preacher's seat. And prosperous mice from fields away come in to hear the organ play, and under cover of its notes ate through the altar's sheaf of oats. A low church mouse, who thinks that I am too papistical and high, yet somehow doesn't think it wrong to munch through harvest evensong, while I, who starve the whole year through, must share my food with rodents who, except at this time of the year, not once inside the church appear. Within the human world I know such goings-on could not be so, for human beings only do what their religion tells them to. They read the Bible every day, and always night and morning pray, and just like me, the good church mouse, worship each week in God's own house. But all the same, it's strange to me how very full the church can be with people I don't see at all except at Harvest Festival. This was written in Vienna, in some public gardens, with a band going on in the distance. In the public gardens, to the airs of Strauss, Eingang, we're in love again, when Ausgang, we were aus. The waltz was played, the songs were sung, the night resolved our fears. From bunchy boughs the lime trees hung their gold electroliers. Among the loud Americans, zwei Engländer were we. You so white and frail and pale, and me so deeply me. I bought for you a dark red rose. I saw your grey-green eyes, as high above the floodlights the true moon sailed the skies. In the public gardens ended things begin. Ausgang, we were out of love, und Eingang, we are in. Here are two poems on the theme of lonely ladies. I was standing one chilly autumn evening on Tunbridge Wells Central Station with a very large crowd of people, and it was a very crowded train, and I noticed on the platform a lady with a lot of flowers, which she'd obviously gathered herself, and I thought this might be her story. With her latest roses happily encumbered, Tunbridge Wells Central takes her from the night. Sweet second bloomings, frost has faintly umbered, and some double dahlias, waxy red and white. Shut again till April stands her little hutment, peeping over daisies, Michaelmas and mauve. Locked is the Elsan in its brick abutment, locked the little pantry, dead the little stove. Keys with Mr. Groombridge, but nobody will take them, to her lonely cottage by the lonely oak. Potatoes in the garden, but nobody to bake them. Fungus in the living room, and water in the coke. I can see her waiting on this chilly Sunday for the 5:40, 20 minutes late. One of many hundreds to dread the coming Monday, to fight with influenza and battle with her weight. Tweed coat and skirt, that with such anticipation on a merry springtime a friend had trimmed with fur. Now the friend is married, and, oh desolation, married to the man who might have married her. High in Onslow Gardens, where the soot flakes settle, an empty flat is waiting her struggle up the stair, and when she puts the wireless on, the heater and the kettle, it's cream and green and cosy, but home is never there. Home's here in Kent, and how many morning coffees and hurried little lunch hours of planning will be spent through the busy months of typing in the office until the days are warm enough to take her back to Kent. I'm told that in one East Coast resort in England there lives a lady who is the last of an order of nuns which has died out except for her, and that she keeps the rule on her own in some lodging house. I once went to Felixstowe, only once, but I thought she might easily live there, and I wrote this poem about her. It's called The Last of Her Order. With one consuming roar along the shingle, the long wave claws and rakes the pebbles down, to where its backwash and the next wave mingle, a mounting arch of water weedy brown. Against the tide the offshore breezes blow. O wind and water, this is Felixstowe. In winter, when the sea winds, chill and shriller than those of summer, all their cold unload, full on the gimcrack attic of the villa where I am lodging off the Orwell Road, I put my final shilling in the meter, and only make my loneliness completer. In 1894, when we were founded, counting our Reverend Mother, we were 6. How full of hope we were, and prayer surrounded, the little sisters of the hanging pyx. We built our orphanage, we ran our school. Now only I am left to keep the rule. Here in the gardens of the Spa Pavilion, warm in the whisper of a summer sea, the cushioned scabious, a deep vermilion, with white pins stuck in it, looks up at me, a sunlit kingdom touched by butterflies, and so my memory of winter dies. Across the grass the poplar shades grow longer, and louder clang the waves along the coast. The band packs up, the evening breeze is stronger, and all the world goes home to tea and toast. I hurry past a cake shop's tempting scones, bound for the red brick twilight of St. John's. Thou knowest my down-sitting and mine uprising. Here where the white light burns with steady glow, safe from the vain world's silly sympathizing, safe with the love that I was born to know, safe from the surging of the lonely sea. My heart finds rest, my heart finds rest in thee. Matlock in Derbyshire has a part of it called Matlock Bath, which is a spa. It seemed to me a kind of nonconformist spa, rather nice and rather forbidding. From Matlock Bath's half-timbered station, I see the black dissenting spire, thin witness of a congregation, stone emblem of a Handel choir, in blessed Bethesda's limpid pool, comes treacling out of Sunday school. By cool Siloam's shady rill, the sounds are sweet as strawberry jam. I raise mine eyes unto the hill, the beetling heights of Abraham. The branchy trees are white with rime in Matlock Bath this winter time, and from the whiteness, grey uprearing, huge cliffs hang sunless ere they fall, a tossed and stony ocean, nearing the moment to o'erwhelm us all. Eternal Father, strong to save, how long wilt thou suspend the wave? How long before the pleasant acres of intersecting lovers' walks are rolled across by limestone breakers, whole woodlands snapped like cabbage stalks? O God, our help in ages past, how long will Speedwell Cavern last? In this dark dale I hear the thunder of houses folding with the shocks, the grand pavilion buckling under the weight of the romantic rocks, and hardest blue John ashtrays seem to melt away in thermal steam. Deep in their nonconformist setting, shivering children wait their doom, the father's whip, the mother's petting, in many a coffee-coloured room, and attic bedrooms shriek with fright for dread of pilgrims of the night. Perhaps it's this that makes me shiver as I traverse the slippery path, high, high above the sliding river and terraces of Matlock Bath, a sense of doom, a dread to see the Rock of Ages cleft for me. Here on the southern slope of Highgate Hill, red squirrels leap the hornbeams. Still I see twigs and serrated leaves against the sky. The sunny silence was of Middlesex. Once a Delaunay Belleville, crawling up West Hill in bottom gear, made such a noise as drew me from my dream world out to watch that early motor car attempt the steep. But mostly it was footsteps, rustling leaves, and blackbirds fluting over miles of heath. Then Millfield Lane looked like a constable, and all the grassy hillocks spoke of Keats. Mysterious gravel drives to hidden wealth wound between laurels, mighty Kenwood Towers, and Grand Duke Michael's house and Holly Lodge. But what of us in our small villa row, who gazed into the Burdett Coutts estate? I knew we were a lower, lesser world than that remote one of the carriage folk who left their cedars and brown garden walls in care of servants. I could also tell that we were slightly richer than my friends, the family next door. We owned a brougham, and they would envy us our holidays. In fact, it was the mother there who first made me aware of insecurity when war was near. "Your name is German, John." But I had always thought that it was Dutch. That TJE, that fatal TJE, which I have watched the hesitating pens of government clerks and cloakroom porters funk. I asked my mother. No, she said, it's Dutch. Thank God you're English on your mother's side. Oh, happy, happy Browns and Robinsons. Safe were those evenings of the pre-war world, when firelight shone on green linoleum. I heard the church bells hollowing out the sky, deep beyond deep, like never-ending stars. Safe in a world of trains and buttered toast, where things inanimate could feel and think, deeply I loved thee, 31 West Hill. At that hill's foot did London then begin, with yellow horse trams clopping past the plains, to grey brick nonconformist Chetwynd Road, and on to Kentish Town, and barking dogs, and costers' carts, and crowded grocers' shops, and Daniel's store, the local Selfridges, the Bon Marché, the Electric Palace, slums that thrilled me with their smells of poverty, till safe once more we gained the leafy slope and buttered toast and 31 West Hill. Here from my eyrie, as the sun went down, I heard the old North London puff and shunt, glad that I did not live in Gospel Oak. A diamond, a heart, no trumps, 2 spades. Happy and tense, they played at auction bridge, 2 tables in the drawing-room for friends, from terracotta flats on Muswell Hill and nearer Brookfield mansions, cigarettes and votes for women ashtrays, mauve and green. I watched the players, happy to be quiet, till someone nice was dummy who would talk, a talk soon drowned. If you'd finessed my heart and played your diamond, if I'd had the lead, I might have done. Well, length is strength, you know, not when your partner's sitting on the ace. Did they, I wonder, leave us in a huff after those hot post-mortems? All I knew was silks and bits of faintly scented fur on ladies' vaguely designated aunts who came on second Thursdays to at homes. The sunlit weeks between were full of maids. Sarah, with orange wig and horsey teeth, was so bad-tempered that she scarcely spoke. Maud was my hateful nurse who smelt of soap and forced me to eat chewy bits of fish, thrusting me back to babyhood with threats of nappies, dummies, and the feeding bottle. "You're late for dinner, John." I feel again that awful feeling, fear confused with thrill, as I would be unbuttoned, bent across her starchy apron, screaming, "Don't, Maud, don't," till dissolution, bed, and kindly fur of aged, uncomplaining Archibald. Following in father's footsteps was the theme of all my early youth. And if I may lapse into prose for a moment, we had a factory founded in 1820 in Islington, which made the tantalus, a thing for locking up the drink and stopping the butler getting at it, and a good many things out of silver and wood, and I was expected to carry it on. The cabinet maker's shop, all belts and wheels and whining saws, would thrill me with the scream of tortured wood, starting a blackened plank under the cruel plane and coming out sweet-scented, pink and smooth and richly grained. While in a far-off shed, caressingly, French polishers, all whistling different tunes, with reeking swabs, would rub the coloured woods, bringing the figured surfaces to light, dark whirling walnut, deep and deeper brown, and rare mahoganies pressed butterflies. Beside the timber yard, a favourite hut encased the thumping heartbeat of the works, an old gas engine, smelling strong of oil. Its mighty wheel revolved a leather belt, which, turning lesser wheels and lesser belts, spread like a drawing by Heath Robinson through all the rambling length of wooden sheds. The works in Birmingham I knew made glass. The stoneworks in Torquay made other things. But what did we do? This I didn't know, nor ever wished to my father's grief. My father used to say to me, "Well now, my boy, I want your solemn word to carry on the firm when I am gone. 4th generation, John, they'll look to you. They're artist craftsmen to their fingertips. Go on creating beauty." What is beauty? Here where I write, the green Atlantic bursts in cannonades of white along Pentyre. There's beauty here. There's beauty in the slate and granite, smoothed by centuries of sea and washed to life as rain and spray bring out contrasting strata higher up the cliff. But none to me in polished wood and stone, tortured by father's craftsmen into shapes to shine in Esprey's showrooms under glass, a Maharaja's Eiffel. For myself, I knew as soon as I could read and write that I must be a poet. Even today, when all the way from Cambridge comes a wind to blow the lamps out every time they are lit, I know that I must light mine up again. My first attraction was to tripping lines. Internal rhyming, as in Shelley's Cloud, seemed then perfection. Or and ere and e'en were words I liked to use. My father smiled. And how's our budding bard? Let what you write be funny, John, and be original. Secretly proud, I showed off merrily, but certain as the stars above the twigs, and deeply fearful as the pealing bells, and everlasting as the racing surf blown back upon itself in Polzeth Bay, my urge was to encase in rhythm and rhyme the things I saw and felt. I could not think. Atlantic rollers bursting in my ears, and pealing church bells, and the puff of trains, the sight of sailing clouds, the smell of grass, were always calling out to me for words. I caught at them and missed again. Catch hold, my father said, catch hold like this, trying to teach me how to carpenter. Not that way, boy. When will you ever learn? I dug the chisel deep into my hand. Shoot, said my father, helping with my gun and aiming at the rabbit. Quick, boy, fire. But I had not released the safety catch. I was a poet. That was why I failed. My faith in this chimera brought an end to all my father's hopes. In later years, now old and ill, he asked me once again to carry on the firm. I still refused. And now when I behold, fresh published, new, a further volume of my verse, I see his kind grey eyes look woundedly at mine. I see his workmen seeking other jobs, and that red granite obelisk that marks the family grave in Highgate Cemetery points an accusing finger to the sky. In late September, in the conquer time, when Poppering and Zillibeek and Mons boomed with 5 9s, large sepia gravures of French, Smith, Dorian and Hague were given gratis with each £half of Brook Bond's tea. A neighbour's son had just been killed at Ypres. Another had been wounded. Rainbow came on Wednesdays with the pranks of Tiger Tim and Bonnie Bluebell and her magic gloves. Your country needs you, serious Kitchener commanded from the posters. Up West Hill I walked, red-capped and jacketed to school, a new boy much too early. School at 9. And here was I outside at 8:30. I see the asphalt slope and smell again the sluggish, sour, inadequate latrines. I watch the shrubbery shake as leaping out come my 2 enemies of former days, but now red-capped and jacketed like me. Betjeman's a German spy, shoot him down and let him die. Betjeman's a German spy, a German spy, a German spy. They danced around me, and their merry shouts brought other merry newcomers to see. Walking from school is a consummate art, which routes to follow to avoid the gangs. I only once was trapped. I knew the trap, I heard it in their tones. Walk back with us. I knew they weren't my friends, but that soft voice wheedled me from my route to Cold Swain's Lane. There in a holly bush they threw me down, pulled off my shorts and laughed and ran away. And as I struggled up, I saw grey brick, the cemetery railings and the tombs. See the rich elms careering down the hill, full billows rolling into Holloway. In the tall classroom, hear again the drone of multiplication tables chanted out. Recall how Kelly stood us in a ring, 3 7s, then add 8 and take away 12, what's the answer? Hesitation then meant shaking by the shoulders till we cried. Deal out again the dog-eared poetry books, where Hemans, Campbell, Longfellow and Scott mixed their dim lights with Edgar Allan Poe, who died of dissipation, said the notes. And what is dissipation, please, Miss Long? Its dreadfulness so pleased me that I learned the bells by heart, but all the time preferred Cassiopeia and the Hesperus as poetry, and Campbell's Soldier's Dream. I couldn't see why Shakespeare was admired. I thought myself as good as Campbell now, and very nearly up to Longfellow. And so I bound my verse into a book, the best of Betjeman, and handed it to one who, I was told, liked poetry, the American master, Mr. Eliot. That dear good man, with Prufrock in his head, and Sweeney waiting to be agonized, I wonder what he thought. He never says when now we meet across the port and cheese. He looks the same as then, long, lean and pale, still with the slow, deliberating speech and enigmatic answers. At the time, a boy called Jelly said he thinks they're bad, but he himself is still too kind to say. I used to go to Cornwall, to North Cornwall, for my holidays, and here is an incident of early childhood days there. That was the summer Audrey, Jock and I, and all the rest of us were full of hope. Miss Usher's coming. Who Miss Usher was and why she should be coming, no one asked. She came, a woman of the open air, swarthy and in girl-guidey sort of clothes. How nice she was to Audrey and to Jock. How very nice to Biddy and to Joan. But somehow, not so nice to me. I love Miss Usher, Audrey said, don't you? Oh, yes, I answered. So do I, said Jock. We vote Miss Usher topping, itchy coo. What was it I had done? Made too much noise? Increased Miss Tunstall's headache? Disobeyed? After Miss Usher had gone home to Frant, Miss Tunstall took me quietly to the hedge. Now, shall I tell you what Miss Usher said about you, John? Oh, please, Miss Tunstall, do. She said you were a common little boy. Childhood is measured out by sounds and smells and sights before the dark of reason grows. Ears, hear again the wild sou'westers whine. 3 days on end with the September gales slam at our bungalows. 3 days on end rattling cheap doors and making tempers short. It mattered not, for then enormous waves, house-high, rolled thunderous on Grenaway, flinging up spume and shingle to the cliffs. Unmoved amid the foam, the cormorant watched from its peak. In all the roar and swell, the still and small things gained significance. Somehow the freckled cowrie would survive, and prawns hang waiting in their watery woods. Deep in the noise there was a core of peace, deep in my heart a warm security. Nose, smell again the early morning smells, congealing bacon and my father's pipe, the after-breakfast freshness out of doors where sun had dried the heavy dew and freed acres of time to scent the links and lawns, the rotten apples on our shady path where blowflies settled upon squashy heaps intent and gorging, at the garden gate reek of selignum on the wooden fence, mint round the spring and fennel in the lane, and honeysuckle wafted from the hedge, the linum's cesspool like a body blow, then clean, medicinal and cold, the sea. Breathe in the ozone, John, it's iodine. But which is iodine and which is drains? Salt and hot sun on rubber water wings, home to the luncheon smell of Irish stew, and washing up stench from the kitchen sink because the sump is blocked. The afternoons brought coconut smell of gorse. At Mabley's farm, sweet scent of drying cow dung. Then the moist exhaling of the earth in Schiller woods, first earth encountered after days of sand. Evening brought back the gummy smell of toys, and fishy stink of glue and stick-fast paste, and sleep inside the laundriness of sheets. This is the story of the first big lie that I can remember telling. I was sent to a preparatory school at Oxford, and here is a boarding school, and here is the incident. Percival Mandeville, the perfect boy, was all a schoolmaster could wish to see. Upright and honourable, good at games, well-built, blue-eyed, a sense of leadership lifted him head and shoulders from the crowd. His work was good, his written answers, made in a round, tidy and decided hand, pleased the examiners. His open smile enchanted others. He could also frown on anything unsporting, mean or base, unworthy of the spirit of the school and what it stood for. Oh, the dreadful hour when once upon a time he frowned on me. Just what had happened I cannot recall. Maybe some bullying in the dormitory. But well I recollect his warning words. I'll fight you, Betjeman, you swine, for that, behind the bike shed before morning school. So all the previous night I spewed with fear. I couldn't box, I greatly dreaded pain. A recollection of the winding punch Jack Drayton once delivered, blows and boots upon the bum at Highgate Junior School, all multiplied by X from Mandeville, emptied my bladder. Silent in the dorm, I cleaned my teeth and clambered into bed. Thin seemed pyjamas, and inadequate the regulation blankets once so warm. What's up? Oh, nothing. I expect they knew. And in the morning, cornflakes, bread and tea, cook's farm eggs, and a spoon of marmalade, which heralded the Northern Hillard hours of Latin composition, brought the post, breakfast and letters. Then it was a flash of hope, escape, and inspiration came. Invent a letter of bad news from home. I hung my head and tried to look as though, by keeping such a brave, stiff upper lip and just not blubbing, I was noble too. I sought out Mandeville. I say, I said, I'm frightfully sorry I can't fight today. I've just received some rotten news from home. My mater's very ill. No need for more. His arm was round my shoulder, comforting. All right, old chap, of course I understand. It was wonderful, as a young boy, to be at Oxford, particularly in the summer term. And here is a description of a river expedition that we had at the school. The bindweed hung in leafy hoops o'er 100 hawthorn caves. For Godstow bound the white road wound in swirls of dust and narrow shaves, and we were biking Red Sea troops between the high cow-parsley waves. Port Meadows level green grew near, with Whiteham Woods and Cumnorhurst. I clicked my Sturmey Archer gear, and pedalled till I nearly burst, and King of Speed attained the lead, and got to gushing Godstow first. The skiffs were moored above the lock. They bumped each other side to side. I boarded one and made her rock. "Shut up, you fool," the master cried. By reed and rush and alder bush, see soon our long procession glide. There is a world of waterweed, seen only from a shallow boat. Deep forests of the bladed reed, whose wolves are rats of slimy coat, whose yellow lily blossoms need broad leaves to keep themselves afloat. A heaving world, half land, half flood, it rose and sank as ripples rolled. The hideous lava from the mud clung to a reed with patient hold, waiting to break its sheath and make an aeroplane of green and gold. The picnic and the orchid hunt, on Oxy Mead the rounders played, the belly floppers from the punt, the echoes that our shouting made, the rowing back, relaxed and slack, the shipping oars in Godstow shade. Once more we biked beside the hedge, and darker seemed the hawthorn caves, and lonelier looked the water's edge, and we were sad returning slaves to bell and rule and smell of school beyond the high cow-parsley waves. Then, like most middle-class boys, I was sent to a public school. Doom, shivering doom, inexorable bells, to early school, to chapel, school again, compulsory constipation, hurried meals, bulked out with whipped cream walnuts from the town. At first, there was the dread of breaking rules. Betjeman, you know that new boys mustn't show their hair below the peak of college caps. Stand still and have your face slapped. Sorry, Jones. the dread of beatings, dread of being late, and greatest dread of all, the dread of games. The centre and the mainspring of your lives, the inspiration for your work and sport, the corporate life of this great public school spring from its glorious chapel. Day by day you come to worship in its noble walls, hallowed by half a century of prayer. The old Lambourne bishop thundered on, when all I worshipped were the athletes, ranged in the pews opposite. Be pure, he cried, and for a moment stilled a sea of coughs. Do nothing that would make your mother blush if she could see you. When the tempter comes, spurn him, and God will lift you from the mire. Oh, who is God? Oh, tell me, who is God? Perhaps he hides behind the reredos. Give me a God whom I can touch and see. The bishop was more right than he could know. For safe in G.F. Bodley's greens and browns, safe in the surge of undogmatic hymns, the chapel was the centre of my life, the only place where I could be alone. There was a building known as Upper School, abolished now, thank God, and all its ways, an 1850 warehouse, smelling strong of bat-oil biscuits, sweat and rotten fruit. The corporate life of which the bishop spoke, at any rate among the junior boys, went on within its echoing whitewashed walls. Great were the ranks and privileges there. 4 captains ruled, selected for their brawn and skill at games, and how we reverenced them. 12 friends they chose, as brawny as themselves. Big Fire, we called them. Lording it, they sat in huge armchairs beside the warming flames, or played at indoor hockey in the space reserved for them. The rest of us would sit crowded on benches round another grate. Before the master came for evening prep, the captains entered at official pace, and walking down the alleyway of desks, beat on their level lids with supple canes. This was the sign for new boys to arise, to pick up paper, apple cores and darts, and fill huge baskets with the muck they found, then, wiping hands upon grey handkerchiefs and trousers, settle down to Latin prose. Upper school captains had the power to beat, maximum 6 strokes, usually 3. My frequent crime was far too many books, so that my desk lid would not shut at all. Come to Big Fire then, Betjeman, after prep. I tried to concentrate on delicate points, art, whether final or consecutive. Oh, happy private school days when I knew. While all the time I thought of pain to come. Swift after prep, all raced towards Big Fire, giving the captain space to swing his cane. 1, they would shout, and downward came the blow. 2, rather louder, then exultant. 3, and some in ecstasy would bellow. 4. These casual beatings brought us no disgrace, rather a kind of glory. In the dorm comparing bruises, other boys could show far worse ones that the beaks and prefects made. No, upper school's most terrible disgrace involved a very different sort of pain. Our discontents and enmities arose somewhere about the 7th week of term. The holidays too far off to count the days till our release. The weeks behind a blank. Haven't you heard, said D.C. Wilkinson, Angus is to be basketed tonight. Why Angus? Never mind. The victim's found. Perhaps he sported coloured socks too soon. Perhaps he smarmed his hair with scented oil. Perhaps he was immoral or a thief. We did not mind the cause. For Angus now the game was up. His friends deserted him. And after his disgrace they'd stay away for fear of being basketed themselves. By the boys, for the boys know best, leave it to them to pick the rotters out, with that rough justice decent schoolboys know. And at the end of term the victim left, never to wear an old Lambourne tie. In quieter tones we asked in hall that night neighbours to pass the marge. The piles of bread lay in uneaten slices with the jam. Too thrilled to eat, we raced across the court under the frosty stars to upper school. Elaborately easy at his desk sat Angus, glancing through the autocar. Fellows walked past him, trying to make it look as if they didn't know his coming fate, though the boy's body called unclean, unclean, and all of us felt goody, goody, good, nice, wholesome boys who never sinned at all. At 10 to 7, big fire came marching in, unsmiling, while the captain stayed outside, for this was unofficial. 12 to 1, what chance had Angus? They surrounded him, pulled off his coat and trousers, socks and shoes, and wretched in his shirt they hoisted him into the huge waste paper basket, then poured ink and treacle on his head. With ropes they strung the basket up among the beams, and as he soared, I only saw his eyes look through the slats at us who watched below. 7, it's prep. They let the basket down, and Angus struggled out. Left, right, we stamped and called. As stained and pale he strode down the long alleyway between the desks, holding his trousers, coat, and pointed shoes. You're for it next, said H.J. Anderson. I'm not. You are, I've heard. So all that term and 3 terms afterwards I crept about avoiding public gaze. I kept my books down in the basement, where the boot hole was, and by its fishtail gas jet nursed my fear. Then there were holidays in Cornwall when I became more adult. These were the years when love gave way to fear. I feared my father, loved my mother more, and just because of this would criticize in my own mind the artless things she said. Dr. Macmillan, who's so good and cheap, says I will tear my kidneys if I stoop, and oh, I do love gardening, for now my garden is the last thing I have left. You'll help me with the weeding, won't you, John? He says my teeth are what is wrong. The roots have been attacked by dangerous bacilli, which breed impurities through all my blood, and this inflames my kidneys. Mrs. Bent had just the same, but not, of course, so bad. She nearly died, poor thing, till Captain Bent insisted she should have them out at once, but mine are ossified into my gums. No dentist could extract them. Listen, John. Poor mother, walking bravely on the lawn, her body one huge toothache. Would she die? And if she died, could I forgive myself? Besides, there's what we pay in bills for you. We've sent you to a most expensive school, and John, oh John, you've disappointed us. Your father said to me the other day how much he wished you were like other boys. He says that you should earn your keep by now, by working at the bench. I did my best to make him give you just another chance. Her wit, her gaiety, the jokes we shared, the love for her that waited underneath I kept in check. And as the motor sped at 35 through Shepton on to Wells, bringing my father nearer to the house, down here in Cornwall, I would run away and leave her as we let the tension mount. And on the morning after, burst the storm. How often have I said the bacon's cold? Confound it, Bess, confound, when will they learn? Bang, boom. His big fists set the cups a-dance. The willow pattern shivered on the shelves. His coat sleeve swept an ashtray to the floor. Just down for breakfast, sir. You're good enough to honour us by coming down at 10. Don't fidget, boy, attention when I speak. As I was saying, now I look at you, bone lazy, like my eldest brother Jack, a rotten, low, deceitful little snob. Yes, I'm in trade, and proud of it I am. Black waves of hate went racing round the room. My gorge was stuck with undigested toast. And did this woman once adore this man? And did he love her for her form and face? I drew my arm across my eyes to hide the horror in them at the wicked thoughts. My boy, it's no good sulking. Listen here. You'll go to Bates and order me the car. You'll caddy for me on the morning round. This afternoon you'll help me dig for bait. You'll weed the lawn, and when you've finished that, I'll find another job for you to do. I'll keep you at it as I've kept myself. I'll have obedience. Yes, by God, I will. You damn well won't. I'm going out today. I darted for the door. My father rose. My saintly mother, on her serious face a regal look of dignified reproach. They both are in the wrong, now seized her chance. She waved an arm and dropped her cigarette. Come back, back, she cried, and heard her cry ring out, as rang the martyred wife's or mother's cry. In many a Temple Thurston she had read, or Philip Gibbs, "He is your father, John." I scraped my wrist along the unstained oak, and slammed the door against my father's weight, and ran like mad, and ran like mad, and ran. I'm free, I'm free. The open air was warm, and heavy with the scent of flowering mint, and beetles waved on bending leaves of grass, and all the baking countryside was kind. Finally, I was lucky enough to be sent to Oxford, the happiest time of my life. No wonder, looking back, I never worked. Too pleased with life, swept in the social round, I soon left old Malburians behind. As one more solemn of our number said, spiritually I was at Eton, John. I cut tutorials with wild excuse, for life was luncheons, luncheons all the way, and evenings dining with the bourgeoisie. Open swing doors upon the lighted George, and whiff of vol au vent. Behold the band sawing away at gems from Chu Chin Chow, as Harold Acton and the punkers wave. My dears, I want to rush into the fields and slap raw meat with lilies. But as the laughs grew long and loud, I heard the more insistent inner voice of guilt. "Stop!" cried my mother from her bed of pain. I heard my father in his factory say, "Fourth generation, John, they look to you." Harry Strathspey is coming, if he can, after he's dined at Blenheim. Hamish says that Ben's got 12 dozen Bollinger, and Sandy's going as a Matelot. I will not have that Mr. Mackworth Price. Graham will be so furious if he's asked. We do not want another ghastly brawl. Well, don't ask Graham then. I simply must. The Hearties say they're going to break it up. Oh, no, they're not. I've settled them all right. I've bribed the boat club with a cask of beer. Moon after parties. Moon on Magdalen Tower. And shadow on the place for climbing in. Noise. Then the great deep silences again. Silk dressing gown, to Sunday morning bells, long after breakfast had been cleared in hall, I lingered in my lavender-scented bath, then wandered out to mass in Pusey House. Those were the days when that divine baroque transformed our English altars and our ways. Fiddleback chasuble in mid-lent pink scandalized Rome and Protestants alike. Why do you try to ape the Holy See? Why do you sojourn in a halfway house? And if these doubts had ever troubled me, praise God they don't, I would have made the move. What seemed to me a greater question then tugged and still tugs. Is Christ the Son of God? Despite my frequent lapses into lust, despite hypocrisy, revenge, and hate, I learned at Pusey House the Catholic faith. Friends of those days, now patient parish priests, by worldly standards you have not got on, who knelt with me as Oxford sunlight streamed on some colonial bishop's broidered cope. Some know for all their lives that Christ is God. Some start upon that arduous love affair in clouds of doubt and argument, and some, my closest friends, seem not to want his love. And why this is, I wish to God I knew. What cranking up of round-nosed Morrises among the bicycles of Broad St. Giles? What mist of buds about the guardian elms before St. John's? What sense of joys to come? Oxford May mornings. When the prunus bloomed, we'd drive to Sunday lunch at Seasoncote. First steps in learning how to be a guest. First wood-smoke-scented luxury of life in the large ambience of a country house. At 6 o'clock from Bourton-on-the-Hill, the bells rang out above the clumps of oak. A light appeal from Longborough lingered on. Morton in Marsh came echoing from the vale. So gently broke the triple waves of sound on a still evening of enormous light that when they ceased, I almost seemed to hear, from open church doors, village voluntaries, a mile and more away. It's time to go. Dinner with Maurice Barra, sharp at 8, high up in Wadham's hospitable quad. The Gilbert Spencers and the Campbell Grey bright in the inner room, the brown and green of rows and rows of Greek and Latin texts, the learning lightly worn, the grand contempt for pedants, traitors and pretentiousness, a dozen oysters and a dryish hock, claret and tornado, a bombe surprise, the fusillade of phrases. I'm a man more dined against than dining, rattled out in that incisive voice and chucked away to be reused in envious common rooms by imitation Morrises. I learned, if learn I could, how not to be a bore, and merciless was his remark that touched the tender spot if one were showing off. Within those rooms I met my friends for life. True values there were handed on a plate as easily as sprouts and aubergine. A very able man. But what's he like? I've told you, he's a very able man. Administrators, professorial chairs in subjects such as civics, and the cad out for himself pretending to be kind. He summed them up in scathing epigram, occasionally shouting out the truth in forceful 1914 army slang. And as the evening mellowed into port, he read us poems. There I learned to love that lord of landskip, Alfred Tennyson. There first heard Thomas Hardy's poetry, master of metre, local as his lanes, the one expressive village fatalist. Yeats he would chant in deep sonorous voice, bring Rudyard Kipling, then so out of date, to his full stature, show that wisdom was not memory tests, as I had long supposed, not first-class brains and swatting for exams, but humble love for what we sought and knew. King of a kingdom underneath the stars, I wandered back to Magdalen, certain then as now that Maurice Barra's company taught me far more than all my tutors did. With sports Bugattis roaring in my ears, with blackbirds bursting from my gramophone, lunching with poets, dining late with peers, I felt that I had come into my own. What was my own? I partly liked to shock, but strawberry-coloured trousers soon made way for shirts by Hawes and Curtis, hats by Locke, and suits for which my father had to pay. What was my own? Week after sunny week I climbed, still keeping in, I thought, with God, until I reached what seemed to me the peak, the leisured set in Canterbury Quad. The sun that shines on Edward James shines also down on me. It's strange that two such simple names should spell such mystery. The air he breathes, I breathe it too. But where's he now? What does he do? Tutorials and dons there were, and tests and teams and toughs and games. But these were neither here nor there to such as me and Edward James. We swung the incense smoke about and drove the smells of breakfast out. But in the end they sent me down from that sweet hothouse world of bells and crumbling walls of golden brown and dotty piers and incense smells and dinners at the George and Hock and Whiteham Woods and Godstow Lock. Failed in divinity. Oh, count the hours spent on my knees in Cowley, Pusey House, and Barnabas and Mary Mag's, St. Paul's, revering Chasubles and Copes and Albs. Consider what I knew of high and low. Failed in divinity. Oh, towers and spires could no one help? Was nothing to be done? No, no one, nothing. Mercilessly calm, the Charwell carried under Magdalen Bridge its leisured puntfuls of the fortunate who next term and the next would still come back. Could no one help? I'd seen myself at dawn, reading old poets in the library, attending chapel in an M.A. gown, and sipping vintage port by candlelight. I sought my tutor in his arid room, who told me, "You'd have only got a third." I wandered into Blackwell's, where my bill was so enormous that it wasn't paid till 10 years after from the small estate my father left. Not even dusty shelves of folios of architectural plates could comfort me. Outside, the sunny Broad, the mouldering busts round the Sheldonian, the hard Victorian front of Exeter, the little colleges that face the Turl, the lean acacia tree in Trinity, stood strong and confident, outlasting me. I called on Arthur. He was packing up for Ireland, for the scintillating lake, his gate-lodge woods, and winding avenue around the limestone walls of Clandeboy. Cheer up, you're looking like a soul in hell. Here's some Amontillado. As I drank, already I could hear my father's voice. My boy, henceforward your allowance stops. You'll copy me, who with my strong right arm alone have gotten myself the victory. Your father's right, John. You must earn your keep. Pentonville Road. How could I go by tram in suit from Savile Row and Charvet tie? How could I, after Canterbury Quad, my peers and country houses and my jokes, talk about samples, invoices and stock? Ah, welcome door, Gabbitas, Thring & Co.'s scholastic agency in Sackville Street. The principal will see you. No degree. There is perhaps a temporary post as cricket master for the coming term at Gerrard's Cross. Fill in this form and give qualifications. Testimonials will help, and if you're accepted, please pay our commission promptly. Well, good day. The sun that shone on Edward James shone also down on me, a prep school master, teaching games, maths, French, divinity. Harsh handbells harried me from sleep for £30 a term and keep.